welcome to a new episode of Hello World. So today we're going to have the opportunity to look into the logistics area and the efforts that are being made to make logistics more sustainable. And when I think about sustainable logistics, I think that I should buy Swedish tomatoes and not Spanish tomatoes, so that I'm not buying stuff that's been transported all over the world, or maybe I consider using transportation with trains instead of cars and so on, or trucks. But our guest of today is taking it one step further. He is giving products an idea of their own and is aiming at logistics solutions where the product actually is requesting to be transported. So removing unnecessary middle hands, among other things. So maybe this will be the solution that actually disrupts logistics area. Magnus, you met our guest Fredrik Svedberg several years ago. Could you tell us a bit more? Who are we meeting today?
Yes, Fredrik and I met a few years back when colleagues and I were creating a new web for one of his companies. And he is a Swedish software engineer, or entrepreneur rather, with over 30 years of experience in areas such as e-commerce, fintech, and e-government, with a keen focus on digitalizing logistics. He's also the founder and CEO of Logitics and the entrepreneur of what he calls the Internet of Logistics, the new democratic internet for next generation trade, which I hope we will hear more about in a while. Normally, when there is not a pandemic going on, Fredrik commutes between Malmö, Sweden and Palo Alto in Silicon Valley, where Logtrade is developing the next generation SaaS platform for circular logistics. Now we will meet him in his home in southern Sweden. So welcome to the show, Fredrik.
Thank you very much for having me. Great to meet you all in this special situation.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
When we spoke the other day, Fredrik, our discussions turned almost philosophical with houses building themselves by requesting the right product for the right place at the right time. And in a way, this is not far from your vision to democratize products and give them a personal ID. What do you mean with democratizing products and the Internet of Logistics? And what would be the main benefits for our society, in your opinion?
First of all, by bringing their own identity to all physical products, we actually have the possibility to give them rights. And all the changes in the history where we are changing the way of using rights, if it is extended to more humans getting rights, or a combination of humans or animals getting rights, it seems like the world is getting a little bit better. So by adding rights and identities to products, we gave them the possibilities to claim the rights and to start to be an active part of the society. In the most weird ways, you can look at this as we are turning Toy Story into real life.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
So from that perspective in Toy Story, the toys is actually chosen who should play with them. They want to be in good families, taking care of the kids. It's not Santa deciding who is going to have what toys, even if we have got that explained for us since we were kids, in especially the Western world. It's actually now the toys who is chosen, who has the right to play with me and will make the best combination. The same thing with the tomato, who should carry me, who should store me, and who is the best one to combine me with a cucumber into a Greek salad.
Okay, so in what would you say would be sort of the benefits of society as a large if we democratize products in that way?
If you look into traditional trade and starting in the 1500s, when we were able to build big ships and going to Asia, buying stuff and selling it back in Europe, starting up before we found out that the other place called America. But at that place, we created the modern version of trade, the 1400s. And that brings sharing risks, sharing how we exchange money, and creating what we called the modern company structures with shares and all that stuff. The reason for that was that the amount of products being put in every ship at that time, the value of that base, the trade base, was so high that there were no family by its own, because it was family or kingdom ruled or whatever we call it, going back to other Disney stories here. But they were sitting on all the capital and the resources. But even those families or kingdoms or whatever had enough money to do this trade, because the ships put so a high amount of trade value. So that created the structure. When you have that structure, and that will develops for like 500-600 years as it done now, that is still a structure where you're looking to put down your own trade risks. So it's not a structure where you actually are aiming for selling all the tomatoes or selling all the goods, because it doesn't matter if the risk behind what you put in and what you get back still is on plus. And if you look into this, this is actually bringing us to a situation where I buy all the tomatoes I can find in order to get the price for the tomatoes to rise, because no one else can get the tomatoes. And if I can just raise the price as much as possible, I can sell like 20% of the tomatoes, still being happy, wasting 80. This is still a very good trade community and a financial transaction, but it's catastrophic for the society, because that creates a situation where actually waste is not a part of the caretaking of the products.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if products get an ID, then obviously they become data carriers. So you could carry data on them saying where has it been, or even what has it been exposed to, or how has it been used, and so on. And collecting the data can help us understand what the product has been going on. And of course, it can also solve several challenges we have today. You already mentioned food waste. Could you elaborate a bit more? What can we do when we have more data? How can we reduce food waste in that sense?
We can start to interact, we can start to combine, and we can start to add our knowledge. So a tomato maybe starts up saying, I go back to the tomato. The tomato starts telling me that I'm coming from this farm. I was raised at this farm. The weather was at this level when I was raised. I was moved by this person or object to this new place. There I met this cucumber. And from that part, we became friends. And then we were in this storage location going to this chef. And at the chef's place, we actually found out that he was starting to mix us with bad water. And we can't say it's bad water. No one can say that. But the water wasn't presenting itself. So the cucumber and I, we didn't get any data presence of what is this water coming from? Why is it? Why are going to be used together with this water? And by coming to that situation with all the food, you can actually end up in a situation where a good product today, you can say this is a very good traceability product like Oatly's have or whatever producer. They can't in the future even be mixed up in a production site where I create food for school kids, for instance, because today you can't follow that chain, because you have a generation today that is very eager of what we're eating, where does it come from, what's the structure of everything we buy, and then they send the kids to the school and we do nothing. But with this tomato still having its capability of bringing data and a combination of that, we will see every lack of data structures and incentives of bringing in information to say this is a good thing we combined, that will just raise itself and it will solve itself without any middle third-party organization needed to take that responsibility.
Okay.
Internet of Logistics is something that you've come up with in a sort of way, the wording, the phrasing, where you say it's actually web of logistics. What's the difference and what's in it for the future?
Internet of Logistics is something that we are taking care about as caretakers at Logtrade, but it's created and invented by several companies in a combination. It's actually by Ericsson, the Swedish telecom communication. We have IBM with the Food Trust Network and their AI. We also have companies like small startup companies in this, and we have universities like Stanford and Iowa State University in the big thing about Internet of Logistics. What we call it is actually a way of making the physical world democratically open itself, like we did with the information society on the web. So by bringing this type of technology, we can take away the need of special knowledge of logistics, the special knowledge of rules, blah, 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 like we did on the information level. So by bringing this, a farmer, a small bakery, a small restaurant will be as logistic competent as the services they need to buy today, like DoorDash or Uber Eats. They don't need that anymore because it's an open society. It's like taking away the need of paper distribution of news, going into the blogs, but for logistics and physical products.
And where are we today in that? Is that a experimental part still, or is it real life?
When is tipping point coming? The tipping point is normally 9 months for all these changes. I don't know when it comes. We are 4 years into the project, 1 year with the ID and the architecture, 1 year with creating the structure, and now 2.5 years of actually intense testing. We have been selling soil in parking garages. We have been selling soil outside people's houses, where the garden is calling for the soil. Go out and buy it and put it in your garden. We are selling products from Oatly founder Björn Öster in hotel lobbies together with the Swedish chain stadiums, training equipment. So if you end up in a situation, I want something now, instead of wait for e-commerce, you run down to a hotel lobby, pick it up and buy it. That's live. That's live kicking already. We're also trying out to build digital farmers market, where the farmers product will move to places we call farmers market, but maybe people don't see it as farmers market. But what we believe in is actually turning all the restaurants into your everyday hub. That's the hub where you go and pick the stuff you want, like the apples and the carrots and stuff you want to feel and see. You can get your ready to eat meal, but you can also return your training shoes and sit there and meet after Corona.
Exactly. Sounds like a completely different world. But you're the CEO of Logtrade, and your company is producing the software as a service to handle this kind of logistics. What is it exactly that your service is providing, and how is it benefiting your clients? Could you give an example?
Yeah, in the Internet of Logistics, you can say we have 4 entities. You have the product itself, the toy, or the Toy Story. Then you have someone that has created this, the owner. In the tomatoes case, it's actually the farmer. In the bakery case, it's the baker. And on the restaurants, it's the chef. So they created something that they want to be moved to someone that should consume it. We call it producer or farm to fork. It can also be a hardware being mounted, but let's stick to the food now. And all of those I mentioned here, like the farm, the restaurant, or the bakery, is actually the existing and the coming customer to our software as a service. That's the businesses that we are working with. Then they need 2 more entities in this world, and they are not direct customers to Logtrade, but they are very close companions and integrators. That's carrier networks, existing carrier networks like the UPS, DHL, the local postal service all over the world, but it's also new type of carrier capacities like last mile operators coming up, and also me and my neighbors caring for each other. We call it the ant society, where I help you, you help me, we carry things around. And the last entity we also need as very close partners in this network, still not customers to us, but close partners, is actually locations, like a hotel lobby, like a restaurant, where we can store things, or robot can go, and robot can exchange, and robot can charge. And we need all this together. And you can see it as the Cisco routers on the web. You can see it as web pages where you end up reading. You can see it like HTML, making it possible for you to find an address easy. You can see it as AdWords. It's actually the restaurant is open, not open, but it will tell it yourself. And we are part of the operating system here, but we start to load stuff into the actually toy or the product going around on this web. So you don't need to be involved. You will not see internet. The toy will just act. And you will just look down, see that's a tomato. Yes, I was missing it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think on your webpage you're explaining the village where you have sort of the bread that is being baked and it's sold in a shop for a certain time, and then you know that it's not going to be sold anymore. It's sort of requesting to be picked up to go to the next place where there maybe can be a part of a lunch going out. And once the lunch time is over, it can ask to be picked up again, and then eventually maybe end up somewhere where you would be, you take the rest of the bread and make it to pig's food or whatever it could be in the end. So really trying to minimum the waste and make sure that it's sold at the right place at the right time as long as there is a demand. Is that sort of correctly translated?
If you move to one tomato having its own rights from 5 tons of tomatoes not having any rights, this actually brings that every little tomato, if I call it that now, every special tomato, me, my individual with my rights, will in this system be able to make sure it's being used in a smart way. No one will accept to be part of the 4 million not being used.
Yeah.
They will shout at us.
Yeah.
Do you have any pilot customer that you could... You mentioned hotel lobbies earlier.
In the US, in the US we are working with a bakery called the Midwife and the Baker, making very expensive bread for prime customers like cafes and restaurants in the first place, and then we move this bread around to different places, making sure it's being used all over the days. We also are working with the Blueberry Association. Blueberries is very growing fast berries all around the world because of the health effect of blueberries. It's supposed to have you better health in combination, reducing the risk of cancer, and it's also helping you getting better sights. So it's a good product. And for blueberries, it's very, very important to be used in quite short time compared to a lot of other stuff. So the Blueberry organization is very important for us in the US. That also brought us to the Strawberry Association that we're working with now. You have 6 seasons of strawberry being grown in California. So it's the reason for us being in Silicon Valley is not only tech, it's also the uniqueness of how things are being grown there for all the year. So we can train the AIs and the systems in completely other ways. In Sweden, we're working with Stadium, putting their training equipment now on test on different new locations. Oatly's founder, Björn Öster, has a company and a new product called the Good ID Drink that is covering up your blood sugar level during the day, so you don't run away and buying bad stuff for you all the time when you're a little bit hungry. And we also have a very interesting new startup called Earthbite that is creating a vegan bar in different sizes. But that's actually a live partner company being built there. So we are on those type of companies. So we are from the big one, family-owned often, always established like Stadium, to this startup, 1-2 person, in this case 1-2 girls coming up with this idea. And we see that this model is running. We also did tests in Sweden with recycling companies like Ragn-Sells. So we turned it around. So instead of selling bread, we collected oil filters.
Oh, okay.
So we can do it on the both ways.
Yeah. Interesting. So if everything can be a marketplace, then everything can be a carrier as well, I guess, as long as you're moving from one place to another. When we discussed the other day, we were discussing service trips, for example, within the municipalities. If you have to get special help to transport yourself to different destinations, if you're in wheelchairs and so on, and you were describing that you could actually use that vehicle for carrying more than persons, for example. So how are you working to come up with creative solutions in terms of who can be and what can be a carrier?
You have to say everything that is moving as a resource. And as we're going down to the individual tomatoes, we're actually in this model going down to us as individual people. When you go to school, go home from school, go to work, go home from work, if we're now going to do that in the future, so that's changed a little bit in our mindset right now. But anyway, when you move, you are a capacity. The same thing with a car or a bus or something like that. And the combination of resources here is very, very important. If you have a bicycle, you can also carry something. Even if you walk, you can carry something because you have your hands free if you don't use your phone. And so on and so on. So by combining this, we can find new resources already existing. So instead of adding resources to a city, making it even harder for the existing resources to move around, we actually use the resources and reuse them. So in order to do that, we have all the combinations of connections. We go for the really, really future autonomous vehicle systems, like the different delivery robots we have. We're already in discussions with most of them. We also have a close relationship and discussion with NVIDIA, who is doing most of the operating systems for them. And then on the other hand, we're talking to organizations like Rädda Barnen, Svenska kyrkan, and all those guys, organizing people and all the clubs, football clubs, for instance, with a lot of kids there. Could they be a resource in this type of society carrying things about? And in the middle between, we have this project together with Harvey, who is doing the logistics for McDonald's, for instance, together with Scania doing the trucks and the buses. And then we are in the mature market. And since we have these robots at one side, the people playing football in the football club on the other hand, and then talk in the middle saying, okay, how should a bus combination with a truck with a combination for a football team look in the future, bringing healthy breakfast in the McDonald's name? So by combining all these, we might end up in some kind of situation. And this is ongoing projects I talk about now. This we do every day, and it's running, and it's actually supported by the Swedish government, also Vinnova in that case.
Cool. I think I'm starting to get a completely different picture of what a sustainable logistic service is actually. So that's kind of cool.
So to round up this conversation, Fredrik, let's go back to your vision about democratizing products. How far are we from reaching that vision, and what is required for this to happen on a larger scale? And what is the impact of that vision?
It's interesting, because if we have had this talk 1-2 weeks ago, I would say I believe and I believe and I think, and I think that like 4 years ago, this is coming in 6 months. It hasn't. Did it take 4 years? No, it's not enough. I don't know when it's coming, but still the tipping point is 9 months when it happens. It has always been in the history. The interesting thing is that we have a new report now from the ThinkX community that is actually putting up everything we says in this vision now as a possibility, because you need a combination of all technical development and a combination of those for things to happen. That has been proven in the history around the car up to the iPhone and back to the Gutenberg. And you can see this in this report. And in this report now, the scientist, not me, the scientist says that something like this, minimalizing the society back to the smart village, will come up in 10 to 20 years latest.
Okay.
Latest. And that takes away the big car manufacturer plants, the big bakery industrial producers, back to the smart small village with the local production. And that's very, very amazing, interesting. And a big part of this is the development of fertilizing things that we have done before, putting it down now to go into 3D printing everything in from production to our nutrition, food. And that's a complete other story that you should have another episode of. But that brings the possibilities for this vision to actually start being used.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Fredrik. It's been really interesting to learn more. I think I'm always fascinated about people who have a vision and I guess the sort of the grit to actually wait and make it happen, who doesn't give up. So it's really interesting to have a look into it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Well.
Talk about having interesting ideas and sticking to them, I think, as well. I believe that, I mean, I sort of have I can see it happen in big cities as such, but maybe in smaller communities in parts of the big cities. But I can imagine if you go to the third world or more rural areas where this can actually make a big difference, so that somebody who is today not into sort of the normal society in terms of being able to deliver their goods in a way that is sort of democratized, this could really make a difference in those kind of societies, I can imagine.
Yeah, and he should hook up with what's his name?
With Vinny, who we talked to
in India,
a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
About fertilizing and helping rural farmers, 25,000 or so.
Yeah, that was just a small pilot.
Yeah.
There were like 250 million farmers or whatever in that small state of India.
And combining those two ideas would be very interesting to see.
That's one of the perks of doing Hello World, is to actually be able to see where pieces fit together in a different manner. So thank you for joining us today, and remember to follow us on LinkedIn so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you.